Before we start, if you have ever rehearsed something out loud when you thought no one could hear you, do me a favor and stay until the end of this. There is a moment in the middle of this story you are going to want to be there for. Now let's begin. He was talking to no one. Standing in the elevator of a 42-story building, rehearsing answers to an interview he had not yet walked into. His voice was steady. His hands were not. He held them behind his back, pressing his fingernails into his palms the way he always did before something that mattered. The woman standing 3 feet to his left had stepped on at the 38th floor. She had not pressed a button. The interview he was preparing for was 11 minutes away, behind a door with her name on it. He did not know that. The elevator was old. The building was mid-renovation, and the lift moved the way old machinery moves when it knows it is being replaced. Slowly, with the sound of cables adjusting overhead. The kind of elevator where two strangers standing 3 feet apart have nowhere to look and nothing to do but exist in the same air for longer than either of them planned. He did not notice her. Or rather, he noticed her the way you notice anyone in a confined space. A peripheral shape. A presence to be polite around. He adjusted his posture when the doors closed, straightened his spine, shifted his weight to his left foot. Then he started again. He was answering a question nobody had asked him. Not yet. His voice was low, but clear. The kind of voice that had practiced being heard in rooms that did not want to listen. He was rehearsing an answer about time management. He said he had learned to organize his hours the way other people organize money. That when you are the only adult in a household, every minute has a job, and the minutes that do not have jobs do not exist. He said it simply, without performance, without the corporate phrasing that interviewers expect and immediately forget. Regina Hayes was standing with her phone in her right hand. Her thumb had been moving toward the screen when he started speaking. It stopped. She did not unlock the phone. She did not put it away either. She just held it, screen dark, while the elevator climbed past the 14th floor. She had planned to get off at 30. The executive conference suite. A quarterly review meeting she had already read the deck for. Her hand moved toward the panel. It did not reach the button. The suit he was wearing did not fit him correctly. The shoulders sat slightly too wide, the way a garment sits when it was made for someone else's frame. But it was clean, pressed with visible care. The cuffs at the wrist had been re-hemmed by hand. Not expertly, but precisely. Someone had taken a needle and thread to those cuffs and made them work. His shoes were older than the suit. Black, polished to the kind of shine that requires effort, not expense. The sole on the left was thinner than the right by a quarter inch. He had been walking unevenly for a long time. There was a mark on the side of his right palm. Blue ballpoint, the shape of a small crooked star. His daughter had drawn it that morning while he was on the phone with the childcare woman, pressing the pen into his skin the way 4-year-olds press things, like the pressing is the point. He had meant to wash it off. He had looked at it in the bus window on the way over, and for a second, before he could stop himself, he had not felt tender about it. He had felt the $85 he did not have, and the suit he had borrowed, and the star sitting on his hand like something that would count against him in a room that counted everything. He had thought, for one ugly second, why did she have to do that today? Then the shame arrived, the way it always did, faster than the thought that caused it. She was 4. She had drawn a star on her father because she loved him, and he was standing in a borrowed suit resenting a child for it. He pressed his thumb over the mark and left it there. The elevator passed the 22nd floor. He moved to the next question. The voice shifted slightly. Not louder. Steadier. The kind of steadiness that arrives when someone has said a thing enough times to stop being afraid of it. What is your greatest weakness? He paused for half a breath before answering. My greatest weakness is time, he said. Not managing it. Having enough of it. I have 2 children. One is 7, one is 4. I do not have a co-parent. I do not have family in the city. Every hour I spend at work is an hour someone else is being paid to watch my kids, and that cost comes out of the same paycheck the work is supposed to provide. So I have learned to be worth more per hour than most people are willing to be. Not because I am better. Because I do not have the option of being slower. The elevator passed 28. Regina did not move. She was not looking at him. She was looking at the floor indicator above the door, but she was not reading the numbers. She was listening to a man describe the mathematics of a life she had studied from the outside and never once calculated from the inside. He was not performing. That was the thing. The words he was saying did not sound like answers. They sounded like facts, the way someone states their height or their age. Information that does not require decoration because it is simply true. The elevator reached 30. The doors opened. Regina did not step out. The doors closed. He did not notice. He had moved on to the next question. He was telling the empty air in front of him why he wanted this job. He did not say growth or opportunity or alignment with company values. He said stability. He said the word like it had a weight he had been carrying for a long time and had finally found the right place to set it down. The elevator climbed past 34, past 36, toward 38. He stopped speaking. He straightened his jacket with both hands. He adjusted the strap of the bag on his shoulder. He took one breath, then another. The doors opened on 38. He stepped out without looking back. Regina stepped out 2 seconds after him. He turned left toward the reception desk. She turned right toward her office. He did not see her go. He did not know yet that the hallway he was walking down and the office she was walking toward were connected by the same door. Andre Whitfield woke up at 5:47 that morning. Not because the alarm went off. Because Zaria had climbed into bed at some point during the night and was lying sideways across the pillow with one foot pressed against his neck. He moved the foot gently. He lay still for a moment, not sleeping. Calculating, childcare today was $85. He had 62 in checking and a 20 taped to the inside of his phone case for the kind of emergency that was not quite an emergency but could not wait. He had put it there 3 weeks ago. He told himself he would not use it today. He had told himself that 4 times before. He got up. The apartment was a one-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a building in Bayview where the hallway lights had been out for 6 weeks and the landlord answered maintenance requests the way most people answer spam. He had been there 11 months. Before that, a studio in the Tenderloin. Before that, a room he rented from a woman in Daly City who changed the lock one Tuesday while he was at work because he was 3 days late. Elijah was already awake, sitting on the floor next to Zaria's pull-out mat, putting her shoes on for her. Not because Andre had asked. Because he had learned that mornings worked better when he helped before the helping was needed. He was 7. He tied shoelaces the way a person does when they have been doing it for someone else, longer than they have been doing it for themselves. Andre ironed the suit on a towel across the kitchen counter. It belonged to his neighbor Reginald, who drove for a rideshare company at night. Reginald had left it on Andre's door handle the previous evening with a note, "Bring it back in one piece and get that job." The iron took 7 minutes to heat up. He had timed it. He had timed everything. The shoes were from a man named Otis from a temp agency 2 years back. Otis wore the same size. He had offered them without being asked, which meant he had noticed Andre looking, which meant Andre had not hidden it well enough. The pants were his own. One pair of black dress pants with no visible wear, kept in a garment bag in his closet, worn only for interviews. They had been to 47 interviews in 3 years. He did not check his bank balance. He had stopped checking on mornings that mattered. He packed Elijah's lunch, a peanut butter sandwich cut diagonally, because that was how he liked it, and because some things did not need to be efficient. He poured cereal for both of them. He stood at the bathroom mirror while they ate and practiced answering questions he already knew the answers to. Zarya came into the bathroom holding one shoe. "You said we could get a bigger place," she said. Not accusing, just checking the way children check facts they are not sure are still true. "We will," Andre said. "Soon, you'll have your own room." He said it easily. He had said it before. It was not true in any way he could point to on a calendar. And he knew it was not true, and she believed him completely, and that was the part that stayed with him afterward on the bus. Not the lie itself. The way she took it and put it away somewhere and stopped worrying, trusting him to carry it for her. A lie you tell a child who believes you is heavier than the truth would have been. The truth you can set down. The lie you have to keep being right about. In his hand, he held a black composition notebook with a cracked spine and pages that had started to yellow at the edges. He did not open it. He held it the way some people hold a photograph before they leave the house. Not to look at. To carry. Andre married a woman named Teresa when he was 22. He had known her since high school. Things changed. Elijah was born when he was 23. Teresa was present for the delivery and absent for most of what came after. Not dramatically, not violently. She simply became less there in increments so small that by the time he noticed the absence, it had already become the norm. She left the apartment when Zarya was 6 months old. What matters is not why she left. What matters is that no one with the authority to make her help had ever been compelled to try, and so Andre stopped waiting for that authority to arrive and started counting on himself instead. He enrolled in community college 4 months after she left. Business administration. 2 years. He finished it in 2.5 while working 2 jobs and raising 2 children under 3. On the days he could not find childcare, Elijah came with him and drew circles on the back of his notebook while the professor explained amortization schedules. Nobody told him to leave. Nobody offered to help either. His academic advisor, a woman named Pauline Kessler, reviewed his schedule and his transcript and the fact that he was 24 with 2 children, no partner, and 30 hours of work on top of a full course load. She looked at him over the top of her glasses. "Can you honestly handle this? With the kids?" Andre did not answer. She had framed it as a question. It was not a question. It was a conclusion dressed up in the shape of one. He finished the semester. He wrote his final exam for business strategy with one hand. The other held a sleeping infant across his chest in a $4 fabric carrier. Zarya was 9 months old. She had fallen asleep 11 minutes in and did not wake until he handed in the paper and walked out into the rain. He passed. By enough to make the dean's list for the only semester he was eligible. He did not attend the ceremony. He could not afford the cap and gown rental. The advisor called it unrealistic. Andre called it Tuesday. Then Elijah got sick. Not a cold. Not something that went away with rest and fluids and a week of missed daycare. A kidney condition that required hospitalization, monitoring, and 2 surgical procedures spaced 5 months apart. Andre slept in a reclining chair next to Elijah's bed for the first 3 weeks. Then on a folding cot the nurses brought him when they realized he was not leaving. Then back in the chair when another child needed the cot. 14 months. He did not work for 14 months. He applied for every assistance program the hospital social worker gave him. He sold the furniture he could not store. He moved out because he could not pay rent from a hospital room. When Elijah was discharged, they moved into a shelter in the Mission for 6 weeks, then the studio in the Tenderloin, then the room in Daly City. His resume carried a 14-month gap between his degree and his work history like a crack in a windshield. Every interviewer saw it. Most asked. He did not explain it. Because he had learned that the moment you say the words, "My son was in the hospital," the interview stops being an interview. It becomes a sympathy exercise, and sympathy had never once turned into a job offer. So the gap stayed empty on the page, and the 47 interviews that followed it stayed in the notebook he carried into every room where someone had the power to change his life, and almost never did. The notebook was a standard black and white composition book, the kind sold in packs of 3 at any drugstore for less than $5. He had bought this one 4 years ago, the week after his 23rd interview ended with a handshake and a sentence that began with, "We'll be in touch." They were not in touch. He started the notebook that night. Not out of hope, out of discipline. Every interview he attended after that was recorded in the notebook the same evening. The date, the company, the position, the name of the interviewer if he remembered it, the questions they asked, the answers he gave, and beside each answer, a small mark. A check if the answer worked. A dash if it did not. And next to the ones that did not work, the revised version. The version he practiced until it replaced the original in his memory. He did not call them rejections. He called them data. 47 data points in 3 years. The notebook was organized the way an engineer organizes a system log, not with emotion, with sequence. The pages that worked well were dog-eared at the top corner, the ones that needed more work at the bottom. Over time, the top corners outnumbered the bottom ones, not by much, but enough to track. The cover was soft from being opened and closed in bus seats and waiting rooms and kitchen tables after the children fell asleep. The spine had cracked in 2 places and been reglued with tape that had yellowed with age. But the notebook was not only data. At the back, past the last interview entry, past the revisions and the marks and the dog-eared corners, there were 3 pages in handwriting that was not Andre's. The handwriting was smaller, blockier, written with a ballpoint pen that pressed hard enough to leave grooves on the page behind it. It belonged to Clarence Whitfield, Andre's father. Clarence loaded trucks at a freight depot on the east side of the bay for 31 years. He started at 19. He worked 6 days a week. He never called in sick. Not when his back gave out at 40. Not when Andre's mother left when Andre was 3. Not when the depot changed ownership twice and cut his hours both times, and he picked up weekend shifts at a second yard to cover the difference. He loaded trucks the way he did everything. Without complaint. Without witnesses. Without expecting that anyone whose packages he lifted would ever wonder who lifted them. He died 2 years before the morning Andre stood in the mirror practicing interview answers. A heart attack on the loading dock between a delivery at 11 and a pickup at 3. He was 53. The pages Clarence left in the back of the notebook were not a letter. They were a list, written in the weeks after he was diagnosed with a heart condition and told by a doctor he could not afford to see regularly that he needed to slow down. He did not slow down. But he wrote the list. 3 items, titled in capital letters at the top of the first page. Things they cannot take from you. The first was your name. The second was how hard you work when nobody is watching. The third was how you walk into a room. Clarence did not explain the list. He did not frame them as advice or lessons or wisdom. He just wrote them. 3 lines in handwriting that pressed hard into the page, as though he wanted to make sure the words would survive the paper. Andre did not find the list until after the funeral. He had taken the notebook out of his father's nightstand drawer, along with a Bible, a pair of reading glasses, and a pay stub dated 4 days before Clarence died. The list was folded into the back cover. He read it once. Then he placed it in the back of his own notebook, behind the 47 interview entries. He did not read it before interviews. He did not need to. He knew what it said. He carried it the way you carry the voice of someone who is no longer there, but whose instructions your body still follows without being told. How you walk into a room. Andre had walked into 47 rooms in 3 years. He had not gotten the job in any of them, but he had walked into every one the same way. The way his father walked onto that loading dock on a Tuesday morning and did not walk off. Regina Hayes built Hayes and Warwick Consulting over 11 years. The company did one thing. It told other companies how to hire, not who to hire. How? The distinction mattered to Regina the way grammar matters to a person who learned English as a second language. Precision was not a preference. It was the infrastructure everything else was built on. The firm consulted for Fortune 500 companies on workforce optimization, attrition modeling, behavioral fit indicators. The language was clinical because the work was clinical. You fed data into a system. The system produced assessments. The assessments produced decisions. The decisions produced outcomes that could be measured on slides with clean fonts and confident arrows pointing upward. Regina had spent 15 years watching hiring panels choose the wrong people for the right reasons. She knew exactly what separated a good employee from a good interviewer. They were almost never the same person. A good interviewer understood rhythm, pauses, eye contact calibrated to convey sincerity without crossing into intensity. A good employee understood something else entirely. But the systems Regina built did not measure that something else. They measured the ability to perform competence in a 45-minute window under fluorescent lighting with a glass of water you were not supposed to drink until offered. She had given keynote addresses explaining the gap between interview performance and job performance, using data sets that made the room nod in unison and changed nothing on Monday. This is not coldness. It is clarity. There is a difference. Regina ran her company the way she ran every room she walked into, with the assumption that if you could not quantify it, you could not trust it, and if you could not trust it, you could not build on it. She was not wrong about that. She was not entirely right either. But she had never been in a position where the difference between those two things mattered enough to stop her. Dolores Hayes cleaned offices at night and worked a checkout register during the day for 23 years. She started the cleaning when Regina was 4. She started the register when Regina was 9, when the cleaning alone stopped covering rent. She worked for a staffing agency that placed temporary labor in buildings whose tenants needed floors mopped and bathrooms restocked between 10 at night and 6 in the morning. She was never interviewed. She was assigned. A dispatcher called on Sunday evenings with the week's placements. She showed up. She cleaned. She left. She was never late. She was never absent. She was never given a chance to be anything other than temporary. The agency took 31% of her hourly rate as a placement fee. She worked the same 3 buildings for 6 years and was never converted to a direct hire. Not because she was not qualified, because nobody had ever looked at her long enough to determine whether she was anything at all. She was a name on a dispatch sheet, except the name was wrong. Her employee badge read Dolores, with an E, not Dolores, printed during her first week. She noticed immediately. She did not correct it. Because she understood, in the way people who work in other people's buildings at night understand, that correcting it would require someone to care enough to reprint it. And caring enough to reprint it would require someone to see her as a person whose name mattered enough to get right. And no one in that building had yet decided she was that kind of person. So the badge stayed wrong for 23 years. She wore it every shift. She looked at it when she clocked in and when she clocked out. The wrong name looking back at her twice a day for the better part of her adult life. She raised Regina in a 1-bedroom apartment in Hunters Point. She cooked dinner before she left for the night shift and labeled it in the refrigerator with the day of the week. She read on her one night off, which was Wednesday, and on Wednesday nights she fell asleep before Regina did, because her body had not yet learned that Wednesday was different. Regina graduated high school with a 3.8. She attended UC Berkeley on a scholarship and a Pell Grant and a work-study job in the admissions office, where she learned for the first time what it looked like when people with resources moved through systems designed to recognize them. She started Hayes & Warwick at 26 with a business plan and a second mortgage on the apartment her mother still lived in. Dolores had co-signed it without reading the terms. She trusted Regina the way she trusted mornings, without needing them to explain themselves first. Dolores died when Regina was 28. A stroke, on the 6th floor of a financial services building on Montgomery Street, between the last cubicle row and the supply closet where she kept her cart. She was 54. She had been cleaning that floor for 3 years. Nobody on that floor knew her name. The badge was in a plastic bag the hospital gave Regina, along with her phone and a folded $5 bill she kept in her left shoe for emergencies. Regina put it in the top drawer of her desk at home. The drawer she opened every morning when she reached for her watch. The lamination had started to peel. The name was still wrong. 3 months after Dolores died, Hayes and Warwick signed its first major contract. Regina built the assessment framework herself. 14 behavioral indicators across 3 performance domains. Efficient, scalable, the kind of system her mother would have been eliminated by in the first round. Not because she lacked the qualities it measured. Because it did not measure the qualities she had. She built it anyway. Because it worked. And working, in the language her career had taught her to speak, meant producing outcomes that could be measured. Her mother's outcomes could not be measured. Only witnessed. And no one had been watching. The interview room was on the 38th floor. A corner office converted for the purpose. Glass table, 4 chairs, 3 on one side, 1 on the other. The one on the other side was slightly lower than the rest, not intentionally. But not corrected either. Rochelle Danner was already seated when Andre entered. Director of Human Resources, 6 years in the role. Precise, efficient, she conducted interviews the way a surgeon conducts a procedure. With a checklist and the professional courtesy of not wasting anyone's time, including her own. Her pen was already uncapped when Andre sat down. Terrence Cole sat to her right. Senior Vice President of Client Operations, 9 years with the company. He smiled when Andre entered. Not a performance smile, the kind a man gives when he has been in enough rooms to know the person across from him is nervous, and he remembers what that felt like. He shook Andre's hand with both of his. The third chair was empty. A folio sat closed in front of it, a pen across the cover, a glass of water poured and untouched. Ms. Hayes sends her apologies, Rochelle said. She'll be joining us shortly. Andre nodded. He placed his bag beside his chair. Not on the table, not on the empty seat. On the floor, tucked against the chair leg where it would not be seen unless someone looked for it. The notebook was inside the bag. He did not take it out. He sat upright. He placed his hands flat on his thighs, beneath the table where no one could see whether they were shaking. They were not. He had done this 47 times. His hands had learned. Rochelle opened the folio. Terrence uncapped his pen. Tell us about a time you managed a project with limited resources. Andre paused. Not long. 2 seconds. The kind of pause that looks like hesitation, but is not. It is measurement. The way a carpenter holds the board against a line before cutting. He began with a temp assignment at a distribution center where he had been placed as a warehouse associate for 3 weeks and ended up reorganizing the shipping intake process because nobody else had, and the backlog was costing 11 hours of overtime per week. He explained what he did. He explained why. He explained the outcome. Rochelle wrote something down. Terrence nodded. The answer was structured, not rehearsed. Structured the way a person structures their thinking when they have done enough of something to know the shape of it before they start speaking. He did not use the word I more than necessary. He did not fill the silence after he finished with a qualifier. He said what he had to say. Then he stopped. Rochelle asked how he handled conflicting priorities. He answered with 2 supervisors and overlapping deadlines he completed by reordering steps neither of them had considered, because neither of them had been doing the task themselves. He did not say he was proud of it. He said it worked. Terrence asked about teamwork. Andre answered with training a new hire while covering a double shift. Because the evening supervisor had quit without notice and the store did not close for staffing problems. He did not describe this as going above and beyond. He described it as the shift. Rochelle's pen had been moving steadily. Check marks next to the questions. Short notes in handwriting so controlled it looked like type. Then her pen stopped near the middle of the page. She did not look up. She drew a small horizontal line beside a section of the resume and underlined something twice. The 14-month gap. It sat between the degree and the first stable work entry like a blank window in a building where every other window had a light on. Rochelle did not mention it. But her pen had marked it, and marking it meant it was now an item. It would come up. It always came up. Andre saw the pen move. He knew exactly where it had stopped. He had watched that pen stop at that same spot in 9 of his last 12 interviews. Different pens, different hands. Same pause. Same place on the page. He did not explain. He kept his hands on his thighs. He kept his eyes on Rochelle. He waited for the next question. Rochelle opened her mouth to ask it. Then the door opened. Regina closed it behind her without apology. She did not explain her lateness. She sat in the empty chair and placed her hands flat on the table. Rochelle shifted the folio toward her. Terence passed a copy of the resume. Regina did not look at it. She looked at Andre. Andre looked at Regina. He did not recognize her immediately. In the elevator, she had been wearing a gray sweater, no blazer, a coffee in one hand and her phone in the other. She had looked like someone who worked in the building, not someone who owned the name on the door. Now she wore a charcoal suit, her collar white and pressed, her watch catching the light as she placed her hands on the table. He did not recognize the clothes. He recognized the eyes. The same eyes that had been standing 3 feet from him in a slow elevator while he rehearsed answers to questions he thought no one was listening to. The same eyes that had not looked at her phone. The same eyes that had not pressed the button for 30. He knew. He did not know how he knew so quickly. The face had changed context. The posture had changed. The entire frame around the person had changed. But the eyes had not moved differently. They watched him now the way they had watched him then, with the kind of attention that does not announce itself. He felt the recognition arrive the way you feel a change in air pressure before a storm. Not through sight, through something older than sight. Every word he had spoken in that elevator, every private sentence he had said to the empty air in front of him, had not been said to empty air. It had been said to the woman now sitting at the head of the table with his resume in front of her and the authority to decide whether the last 3 years amounted to anything at all. Before I tell you what he did next, I want to ask you something, because this is the part of the story that matters. If you have ever been the person in the elevator, the one rehearsing, the one preparing for a door that had someone else's name on it, comment the word ready. I want to see how many of you are out there. Because there are more of you than anyone in that room would guess. Now stay with me, because what happened next is the whole reason I wanted to tell you this. He thought he had lost. He thought the man who had stood in an elevator talking to himself about time management and weakness and stability had already been assessed and filed into whatever box a CEO puts people in when she catches them being unguarded in a confined space. He did not excuse himself. He did not drop his eyes. He did not apologize for anything he had said in the elevator, because none of it had been a lie. He sat in the borrowed suit with the re-hemmed cuffs and the polished shoes with the uneven soles, and he held her gaze the way his father had taught him to hold a room. Not with defiance, not with submission, with presence. The third item on the list, how you walk into a room. Andre had already walked into this one. Now he was staying in it. Regina did not follow the question sheet. She did not open the folio Rochelle had placed in front of her. She did not review the resume. She sat for a moment. Then she spoke. You said something in the elevator about stability. I would like to hear what that word means to you. Specifically, the room went quiet. Rochelle looked at Regina. This was not on the list. This was not part of the structured interview protocol she had designed for this role. Terence stopped writing. His pen rested on the pad. He looked at Andre the way you look at someone when you realize the conversation has changed and you do not yet know into what. Andre did not move. He heard the question. He heard the word elevator. He understood now that she was not pretending it had not happened. She was not ignoring it. She was asking him to repeat it to her face. In a room with two other people and a glass table and a view of the bay, on the record. He took a breath. He started short. Stability means not moving. He stopped. Then he started again, longer this time. It means my son does not ask me every Sunday night whether we are going to live in the same place next week. It means my daughter can draw a picture of our apartment at daycare, and it is still accurate when I pick her up. It means I can tell my children what is happening on Thursday because I know what is happening on Thursday. Rochelle's pen was still. Regina was still. Terence was still. Andre kept going. He talked about the 14 months. He said the words he had never said in any of the 47 interviews before this one. My son was sick. A kidney condition. 2 surgeries. I slept in a hospital chair for 14 months because there was nowhere else to sleep, and I was not going to leave him in that room alone. He did not look away when he said it. He did not soften his voice. He stated it the way he stated his height or his name. A fact that did not require decoration. That is the gap on my resume. I do not explain it in interviews because every time I have explained it, the interview turned into something else. Something that ended with kindness and no callback. He paused. He looked at Regina. Stability is not a career goal, he said. It is not a 5-year plan. It is a 7-year-old boy who stopped unpacking his backpack because he learned it was easier to leave when your things were already in the bag. He stopped. The sentence sat in the room like a stone someone had placed on a table and walked away from. Rochelle looked at the resume. At the gap. At the 2 thin underlines she had drawn beside it 4 minutes ago. She did not add a note. Terence put his pen down entirely. Regina looked at Andre Whitfield, the man who had been talking to no one in an elevator 40 minutes ago. He had not been talking to no one. He had been talking to the version of himself that still believed the 48th room might be different from the first 47. He was still talking to that version. He had never stopped. Andre left the room at 11:14. He shook hands with Rochelle and Terence. He nodded once at Regina. He picked up his bag from beside the chair leg. He walked out the way he had walked in. Steady, unhurried, he did not look back at the empty glass of water he had never been offered. He did not look at the view. He closed the door behind him, and the latch clicked. And the room became 3 people and a decision. Rochelle spoke first. She spoke the way she always spoke after an interview, with the resume open in front of her and her notes organized by question number and her assessment already structured before her mouth opened. The candidate is competent, she said. Communication skills are above average. Task examples were specific, measurable, relevant, she paused. However, there is a 14-month employment gap with no documented explanation on the record until today. 3 residential changes in 4 years. 2 of the 3 stability indicators fall below the threshold we set for this role. She looked at her notes. I would classify him as qualified but not recommended. She said it without malice. She said it the way a machine produces an output. The inputs were entered. The formula was applied. The result was the result. She was not being cruel. She was being consistent. The framework flagged candidates who moved 3 times in 4 years and completed a degree outside the standard timeline as moderate to high attrition risk. It did not know the moves were from a shelter to a studio to a room with a landlord who changed the locks on a Tuesday. It did not know the 3 positions were not instability but necessity, held simultaneously, not sequentially. It did not have a field for sleeping in a hospital chair for 14 months. Regina knew this. She had built the field that did not exist, and she had watched it screen out exactly this kind of candidate, year after year, in a report whose recommendation to fix it no client had ever implemented, and she had never required them to. The system was not biased. It was precise. And precision without context is just a faster way to be wrong. Terence spoke second. He spoke more slowly. He said the candidate had been strong. He said his answers were well organized. He said he had no significant concerns, but also no significant reason to prioritize him above the other two finalists, whose resumes did not carry the same risk profile. He was not opposed. He was not convinced. He was in the middle, which, in a hiring committee, functioned the same way the middle always functions, as permission for the loudest voice in the room to set the direction. Regina had not spoken. She was sitting with her hands flat on the glass table, the same way she had placed them when she entered the room. She had not opened the folio. She had not reviewed the resume. She had not made a single note. She sat for 11 seconds after Terrence finished. Then she reached below the table, not for a file. She opened the shallow drawer built into the underside of the conference table on the executive side and took out a small laminated card. She placed it on the glass between the folio and the water pitcher. An employee badge. The lamination peeled at two corners. The clip on the back bent from years of being attached to the same shirt. The name read Dolores. With an E. Rochelle looked at the badge. Terrence looked at the badge. Neither of them had seen it before. Regina looked at it for a moment, the way you look at something you have looked at 1,000 times and never once looked at long enough. Then she told them. She told them about a woman who cleaned offices from 10 at night until 6 in the morning for 23 years. Never interviewed. Dispatched, assigned, placed, nobody at any of those buildings ever learned her name. And the one time her name appeared on a badge, they spelled it wrong, and she never corrected it, because correcting it would have required someone to see her as a person worth spelling correctly. She died on a Tuesday night on the 6th floor of a building on Montgomery Street, and nobody on that floor knew who she was. She did not say the word mother. She did not need to. Then she told them what she heard in the elevator. She told them about a man rehearsing answers to an interview he had not yet been given. She told them about the way he described time management, about the way he said the word stability, about the fact that nothing he said in that elevator was different from what he said in this room. She did not tell them what to decide. She did not override the process. She placed the badge on the table, and she told them what she knew, and she let what she knew sit beside what they knew. And she waited. Rochelle looked at the badge for a long time. She looked at her notes. She looked at the two thin underlines beside the 14-month gap. She did not cross them out. But she did not circle them either. Terrence picked up his pen and wrote something on his pad. One word. The decision was unanimous. But it was not unanimous for the same reasons. The call came on a Wednesday, 3 days after the interview. Andre was at the kitchen counter packing Elijah's lunch when his phone rang. He did not recognize the number. He answered the way he answered every unknown number, with the voice he used for landlords and bill collectors and automated systems. The voice that expected nothing. This is Regina Hayes. He stopped moving. The peanut butter knife was in his right hand. He set it down on the counter. He did not sit. He stood. I want to be honest with you about something before I say anything else, she said. He waited. He had been waiting for phone calls like this for 3 years. He knew the architecture. The pause before the polite rejection. The compliment that preceded the decline. The phrase "we were very impressed" followed by the word "however." He had 47 versions of it stored in the notebook on his kitchen table. I was in the elevator, she said. I know, he said. I heard everything you said. I know, he said again. She was quiet a moment. The line held. Neither of them filled it. Then she spoke. The hiring committee made a unanimous decision. We would like to offer you the position. He did not respond immediately. Not because he did not hear her. Because the sentence did not match any of the 47 patterns he had memorized. It did not begin with "unfortunately." It did not contain the word "however." It did not end with a suggestion to reapply in 6 months. It was a sentence he had never practiced a response to. But I need you to understand something, she continued. I did not hire you because of what I heard in the elevator. I did not hire you because I felt sorry for you. I hired you because you were the best person in the room. The elevator did not change that. It confirmed it. He stood at the kitchen counter with the phone against his ear and the peanut butter knife on the counter and the cereal boxes stacked against the wall. He did not cry. He did not thank her 3 times or ask her to repeat it or say he would not let her down. He said one word. When? She told him. He wrote the start date on the back of a grocery receipt with the pen he kept next to the phone. Monday, 8:30. 38th floor. He hung up. He stood in the kitchen for a full minute without moving. Then he picked up the knife. He finished making the sandwich. He cut it diagonally because that was how Elijah liked it and because some things do not change just because everything else is about to. Andre arrived at 8:12 on his first Monday. Not because 8:30 was not early enough, because 8:17 was when the bus dropped him off, and waiting 18 minutes in the lobby felt like wasting time he had spent 3 years learning not to waste. He found his desk. He placed his bag beneath it. The notebook stayed inside. He did not need it anymore. The desk was real. The chair was real. The nameplate had his name on it, spelled correctly. He started working before anyone showed him the system. He figured out the filing structure by reading the folder labels. He figured out the coffee machine by watching the person who used it before him. The way he had figured out everything else in his life, by paying attention when no one expected him to. He arrived early every day that week, not to impress anyone. Because early was who he was. His father had not been late in 31 years. Andre had never been late in his life. These were not habits. They were inheritances. After the second month, something changed at home. So small that someone who did not live inside the math of Andre's daily life would not have noticed it. Elijah stopped asking. He did not ask on a Sunday night whether they would be living in the same place the following week. He did not ask on a Monday morning whether the bus route would change. The question that had appeared 3 times simply stopped appearing, and its absence was louder than it had ever been. Zaria brought home a drawing from daycare, crayon on construction paper. A tall building, 42 floors, though the floors were uneven and the windows were different sizes, and the door at the bottom was bigger than any real door. At the top, in the teacher's handwriting, it said, "Daddy's building." Andre put it on the refrigerator. He looked at it every morning while he made lunches. It was the first drawing Zaria had ever made of a place that still existed when she came home. One afternoon in the 3rd month, Regina walked into the break room on the 38th floor to refill her water. Andre was not there, but his notebook was. It was sitting on the table beside a half-finished cup of coffee. Open, not to a page of interview data, not to a page of checks and dashes. It was open to the back, to the pages with handwriting that was not Andre's. She did not mean to read it. She looked down, and the words were there. 3 lines in ballpoint pen that had pressed hard enough to leave grooves on the page behind it. Things they cannot take from you. Your name. How hard you work when nobody is watching. How you walk into a room. Regina sat down. She did not pick up the notebook. She did not touch it. She looked at 3 sentences written by a man who loaded trucks for 31 years and never once called in sick and died at 53 on a loading dock where the packages he lifted went out to people who never wondered who lifted them. She thought about the badge in her desk drawer. Dolores, with an E. She thought about how many people walk into rooms every day carrying things no one ever asks to see. Letters, lists, prayers written on the backs of receipts. The quiet cargo of people who have been told their whole lives that what they carry does not matter. She closed the notebook. She put it back exactly where he had left it. Some things do not need to be spoken to be understood. He walked into that elevator practicing for a job interview. He did not know he was already being interviewed. The truth is, most of us are. Every room we walk into, every bus we ride, every conversation we have when we think nobody is listening. Someone is always listening. The question is not whether you are being watched. The question is whether who you are when no one is looking is the same person you become when everyone is. There are people right now rehearsing answers on public buses, ironing borrowed suits on kitchen counters at 5 in the morning. They are not desperate. They are preparing. There is a difference, and it is one that most of the people on the other side of the interview table have never had to learn. There is someone in your life right now preparing for something they have not been given yet. Showing up early to places that have not yet decided whether to let them stay. You might be that person. And if you are, keep rehearsing. Keep ironing the borrowed suit. Keep writing in the notebook. Keep walking into rooms the way your father taught you. The right room will hear you. If this story reminded you that preparation is not desperation, do one thing before you go. Send it to the one person you know who is still walking into rooms, still waiting for the 48th door to be different from the first 47. They need to hear it more than you know. Subscribe so the next person who needs this finds it too, and I will see you in the next one. This is a fictional story, but the numbers in it are not. Single fathers raising children alone face the same callback penalties, the same assumptions, the same quiet math as everyone else the system was not built to see. Resume gaps are penalized regardless of the reason, whether illness, caregiving, or economic collapse. The phrase cultural fit, used in the majority of post-interview evaluations, correlates with the exclusion of candidates whose lives did not follow a straight line. These are documented findings. They are known. They are measured. They are rarely acted upon. I wrote this because I have watched people practice for interviews on public buses. I have seen resumes with gaps that contained more courage than most careers. And I have sat in rooms where the best candidate was not the one who performed best, but the one whose performance and person were the same thing. That distinction matters. If it made you think, good, thinking is the first thing that has to happen before anything changes. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.